August 29, 1988, 6:17 a.m. John Gotti sat in his burgundy leather chair at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, staring at a single sheet of paper that would force him to make the most difficult decision of his criminal career. The paper contained 3 words that had shattered 30 years of friendship. Willie Boy's dead, but Willie Boy Johnson wasn't supposed to be dead. 6 months earlier, Gotti had sworn an oath on his deceased son's grave that Willie Boy would live. He had given his word, his bond, his sacred promise that no harm would come to the man who had been his closest friend for 3 decades. What Gotti didn't know, what nobody knew until that morning, was that Willie Boy Johnson had been playing the most dangerous game in organized crime history. For 15 years, he had been feeding information to both the FBI and the New York State Police, while sitting at John Gotti's right hand, listening to every secret, every plan, every intimate detail of the Gambino family's operations. And somehow, impossibly, Willie Boy had managed to fool the smartest crime boss in America for over a decade. But the most shocking part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was what Willie Boy had done with that betrayal that would haunt John Gotti for the rest of his life. To understand what happened that August morning, you need to understand who Willie Boy Johnson was to John Gotti. This wasn't just another associate or crew member. This was brotherhood forged in blood, tested in war, and strengthened by 30 years of absolute trust. Willie Boy had been there when Gotti was nothing more than a street-level hijacker stealing cargo from JFK Airport. He'd been there through the early days at the Bergen Club, through the rise in the family hierarchy, through every federal investigation and territorial dispute. When Gotti needed someone eliminated, Willie Boy handled the logistics. When Gotti needed advice on strategic planning, Willie Boy was the voice he trusted most. But Willie Boy Johnson was also something that nobody in organized crime had ever encountered before: a criminal genius who could live in 2 worlds simultaneously without either side discovering his dual existence. The story began in 1958, when a 23-year-old Native American drifter named Wilfred Johnson walked into a Queens social club looking for work. He was 6'2", 240 pounds of muscle and bone, with hands that could crush a man's throat and reflexes that could outdraw anyone with a gun. But what made Willie Boy truly dangerous wasn't his physical capability, it was his intelligence. Most people looked at Willie Boy and saw exactly what he wanted them to see: a loyal, somewhat simple enforcer who followed orders without question. The truth was far more complex. Willie Boy Johnson had an IQ that tested in the genius range, a photographic memory for faces and conversations, and an understanding of criminal psychology that would have impressed FBI behavioral analysts. John Gotti met Willie Boy in 1959, when both men were working hijacking operations out of JFK Airport. Gotti was immediately impressed by Willie Boy's competence and reliability. Unlike most muscle-for-hire criminals, Willie Boy thought 3 moves ahead. He planned escape routes before jobs began. He studied airport security patterns for weeks before attempting thefts. Most importantly, he never panicked under pressure. "This guy's different," Gotti told his brother Gene after their first successful operation with Willie Boy. "He's got the kind of mind that can see around corners." Gotti had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. Their partnership deepened throughout the 1960s. Willie Boy became Gotti's most trusted associate, the man who knew every secret, every plan, every vulnerability in the future boss's operations. When Gotti was arrested for hijacking in 1968, Willie Boy visited him in prison every week. When Gotti was released in 1972, Willie Boy was waiting at the prison gates. But what John Gotti didn't know was that Willie Boy Johnson's intelligence had attracted attention from a completely different source: the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In 1975, FBI Special Agent Howard Lidbetter was reviewing criminal profiles of known Gambino family associates when Willie Boy Johnson's file caught his attention. Unlike most mob enforcers, Willie Boy had never been arrested for violent crimes. His record showed sophisticated thinking, carefully planned thefts, minimal evidence left behind, and most importantly, no cooperation with law enforcement during the few times he had been questioned. The FBI approach came in March 1975, when Willie Boy was leaving a construction site where he worked his legitimate job as a crane operator. Two federal agents approached him with a proposition that would change everything. "We know you're with John Gotti," Agent Leadbetter said. "We know you're involved in family operations. And we know you're smart enough to understand that this life only ends one way: prison or death. We're not asking you to betray your friends. We're asking you to help us understand the organization." What the FBI agent didn't understand was that Willie Boy Johnson had been expecting this conversation for years. His intelligence had always been his greatest asset and his most dangerous liability. He knew that eventually, law enforcement would approach him. But most importantly, Willie Boy Johnson had developed something that no one suspected: a deep, personal resentment toward the very criminal organization he served. For 20 years, Willie Boy had watched John Gotti rise through the ranks of the Gambino family while he remained an associate, never eligible for full membership because of his Native American heritage. He had proven his loyalty 1,000 times over, had risked his life repeatedly, had kept every secret and followed every order. Yet he would always be an outsider, tolerated but never truly accepted. The FBI's offer represented something Willie Boy had never been given in the criminal world: the opportunity to be essential rather than expendable. Willie Boy Johnson's method was unlike anything law enforcement had seen before. Instead of providing broad information about family operations, he focused exclusively on one target: John Gotti. Every conversation, every plan, every strategic decision that involved Gotti was carefully documented and reported to federal agents. But here's what made Willie Boy's betrayal truly extraordinary: he never provided information that would directly harm anyone else in the organization. When FBI agents asked about other family members, Willie Boy claimed ignorance. When they pressed for details about criminal associates, he provided minimal information. The FBI initially found this frustrating, but they gradually realized they were receiving something far more valuable than typical informant reports. Willie Boy Johnson was providing them with a complete understanding of how John Gotti's mind worked: his strategic thinking, his decision-making process, his weaknesses and strengths, his fears and ambitions. For over a decade, the federal government had access to John Gotti's most intimate thoughts through the man who sat closest to him in every meeting, every planning session, every moment when Gotti revealed his true intentions. Meanwhile, Willie Boy Johnson continued his dual existence with extraordinary skill. To John Gotti, he remained the most loyal and reliable associate in the family. Willie Boy's intelligence reports actually helped Gotti, in some cases, as the information flow worked both ways. Willie Boy would learn about federal investigations from his FBI contacts, then find ways to warn Gotti without revealing his source. This created a bizarre three-way relationship where Willie Boy was simultaneously betraying Gotti to the FBI while protecting him from other law enforcement agencies. But Willie Boy made one critical error in his calculations. He underestimated John Gotti's paranoia and intelligence. By 1985, Gotti had begun noticing patterns that didn't make sense. Federal investigations seemed to focus too precisely on his activities while leaving other family operations untouched. FBI surveillance teams appeared at locations where only his closest associates knew he would be present. Most disturbing, agents asked questions during interrogations that suggested intimate knowledge of private conversations. Gotti began systematically analyzing everyone with access to sensitive information. He created false information and tracked how it moved through different channels. He varied his routines and observed which changes attracted federal attention. Slowly, methodically, he hinted the possibilities. The breakthrough came in late 1986, when Gotti realized that FBI operations consistently focused on activities that Willie Boy Johnson had knowledge of, while ignoring operations he wasn't involved in. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable to someone with Gotti's analytical mind. But instead of confronting Willie Boy immediately, Gotti did something that revealed his own criminal genius. He began feeding Willie Boy false information to test his theory. Over several months, Gotti told Willie Boy about fictitious meetings, imaginary criminal plans, and fabricated conversations with family members. Then he waited to see if the FBI acted on this false intelligence. They did. By early 1987, John Gotti knew with absolute certainty that his closest friend and most trusted associate had been betraying him for over a decade. But what Gotti discovered next was even more shocking than the betrayal itself. Through his own law enforcement contacts, Gotti learned that Willie Boy Johnson's cooperation was limited exclusively to information about him. FBI reports showed no intelligence about other family members, no details about broader criminal operations, no information that had harmed anyone else in the organization. Willie Boy's betrayal was personal, focused, and surgically precise. He hadn't betrayed the Gambino family, he had betrayed John Gotti specifically. This discovery created a psychological crisis for Gotti, unlike anything he had experienced. The betrayal was devastating, but it was also strangely respectful. Willie Boy had protected everyone, except the one person he should have been most loyal to. The decision was made for him in December 1987, when federal prosecutors made a catastrophic error that would change everything. During pretrial proceedings for the federal racketeering case against Gotti and several associates, Assistant United States Attorney Diane Giacalone made a statement in open court that shocked everyone present. She identified Willie Boy Johnson as a federal informant and announced her intention to use him as a witness in the upcoming trial. The courtroom erupted. Defense attorneys objected violently. FBI agents in the gallery looked stunned. Even the judge appeared confused by the unprecedented disclosure. But the person most affected was Willie Boy Johnson himself. For 12 years, he had carefully balanced his dual existence, providing information while maintaining his criminal relationships. Giacalone's announcement destroyed that balance instantly and irrevocably. But John Gotti's reaction was something nobody expected. 3 days after the court disclosure, Gotti approached Willie Boy in the federal holding facility where they were both being held pending trial. The conversation was witnessed by federal marshals and later documented in court records. "I know what you did," Gotti said quietly. "I've known for months. I know about the FBI, the reports, all of it." Willie Boy started to speak, but Gotti held up his hand. "I also know what you didn't do. You never gave them anything about my family. You never hurt my friends. You never betrayed anyone except me." The words hung in the air between them. "I understand why," Gotti continued. "I understand what this life cost you, what it cost your family, what it cost your future. And I understand that you never felt like you got the respect you won." Willie Boy's eyes filled with tears. The first emotion anyone had seen him display since the court disclosure. "But here's what I need you to understand," Gotti said, his voice still quiet but carrying complete authority. "I'm going to give you something no one else in this situation has ever received. I'm going to give you my word sworn on my dead son's grave, that you will not be killed, not by me, not by my people, not by anyone I can control." The promise was unprecedented in organized crime history. Betrayal carried an automatic death sentence. There were no exceptions, no appeals, no mercy. But John Gotti was offering Willie Boy Johnson something that had never been offered before: forgiveness. "You can never come back," Gotti continued. "You can never be part of this world again. But you can live, take your family and disappear, start over somewhere else. But if you testify against me, if you cooperate with them in court, the deal is off. Stay silent and you stay alive." Willie Boy Johnson made his choice immediately. Despite pressure from federal prosecutors, despite threats of extended prison time, despite offers of witness protection, he refused to testify against John Gotti or anyone else involved in the case. His refusal to cooperate destroyed the government's case. Without Willie Boy's testimony, prosecutors couldn't prove their most serious charges. In March 1988, John Gotti and all his co-defendants were acquitted on all charges. Willie Boy Johnson was released from federal custody in April 1988. True to Gotti's promise, no one bothered him. He returned to his job as a crane operator, moved to a small apartment in Queens, and tried to rebuild his shattered life. But Willie Boy made one critical error in judgment. He trusted John Gotti's promise completely. What Willie Boy didn't understand was that Gotti's oath had conditions that weren't explicitly stated. The promise applied only as long as Gotti himself was in control. But the criminal world doesn't recognize individual promises when they conflict with organizational principles. By summer 1988, pressure was mounting on Gotti from other crime families. The Colombo family argued that Willie Boy's betrayal had set a dangerous precedent. If informants could be allowed to live, it would encourage others to cooperate with law enforcement. "What are you waiting for?" Colombo representatives asked Gotti. "This guy's done too much damage. He's got to go." Gotti found himself trapped between his personal word and organizational pressure. He had given his oath to Willie Boy, but he was also responsible for maintaining respect and authority within the broader criminal community. The solution he chose revealed both his strategic thinking and his moral complexity. Instead of ordering the hit directly, Gotti gave permission for others to handle the situation. He assigned the contract to Eddie Leno and Fat Sally Scala, two trusted associates who had recently been inducted into the family. The message was clear. This wasn't Gotti breaking his word. This was the organization enforcing its rules. But Gotti also made sure that Willie Boy would have a chance to escape if he was smart enough to recognize the danger. Through intermediaries, word was passed to Willie Boy that his situation had changed. Other families were pressuring Gotti to authorize his death. He was advised to leave New York immediately, to take his family and disappear while he still could. Willie Boy Johnson's response revealed the tragic flaw that would cost him his life. He still believed completely in John Gotti's promise. "He gave me his word on his dead son's grave," Willie Boy told the messenger. "That means something. John Gotti doesn't break his word." It was the last conversation Willie Boy Johnson would ever have about John Gotti. On August 29, 1988, at 6:17 a.m., Willie Boy Johnson was walking to his construction job when a car pulled up beside him. Tommy Karate Patira and Vincent Kojak Giattino emerged with automatic weapons and fired 14 shots into Willie Boy's body. He died instantly, his body collapsing on a Queens sidewalk just 3 blocks from where he had first met John Gotti 30 years earlier. When John Gotti learned of Willie Boy's death, witnesses reported that he sat in silence for over an hour, staring at the same sheet of paper that would later be found on his desk. A simple death notification that read Willie Boy's dead. The killing sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld, but not for the reasons most people expected. For the first time in organized crime history, an informant had refused to testify against the people he had betrayed. Willie Boy Johnson had chosen loyalty over survival, friendship over freedom, and trust over self-preservation. His death also marked the end of John Gotti's reputation for keeping his word. Criminal associates who had trusted Gotti's promises began to reconsider their faith in his protection. But the most profound impact was on Gotti himself. Those closest to him reported that Willie Boy's death changed something fundamental in the boss's personality. He became more suspicious, more paranoid, more willing to use violence as a first resort rather than a last option. The man who had once been willing to spare the life of his greatest betrayer had learned that mercy was perceived as weakness in the world he had chosen to inhabit. The story of Willie Boy Johnson became a cautionary tale that echoed through the criminal underworld for decades. It demonstrated that in organized crime, there are no permanent friendships, no unbreakable promises, and no sanctuary from the corkensigs of betrayal. But it also revealed something that law enforcement officials rarely acknowledged. Even in the darkest criminal enterprises, bonds of loyalty and friendship could transcend rational calculation. Willie Boy Johnson had died believing in John Gotti's promise, and John Gotti had lived with the knowledge that keeping that promise had been impossible. If this story of loyalty, betrayal, and the impossible choices that define criminal leadership moved you, hit that subscribe button. We're uncovering the John Gotti stories that reveal the human cost of power, the friendships that couldn't survive the pressure, the promises that couldn't be kept, the decisions that haunt leaders forever. Drop a like if you understand how 30 years of friendship could end with 14 bullets on a Queens sidewalk. More untold Gotti stories coming next. Don't miss the complex reality behind America's most notorious crime boss.